Hi, everybody. I guess you can tell that we're on location here at the Airbus Pavilion. My name is Vince Mickens, and this is All Things Aviation and Aerospace. It's been one heck of a first couple of days here at this show. We started off with a bang yesterday with all kinds of planes coming in and people coming in and camping and pedestrians and attendees and whatever you want to call it. It was just a madhouse yesterday. And today doesn't look like it's going to be any different, although the rain slowed things down a little bit.
Well, you started with a bang this morning. We had thunder.
We had thunder, yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, but this is a real pleasure to not only be here at the show, but hanging out with Airbus Americas and just talking about some important things that are that we're addressing in aviation, and particularly the future of our industry, which is growing leaps and bounds.
I think we're at a point where we're about to take some very important leaps.
Yes, absolutely. So with that said, let me introduce our guest. Amanda Simpson, welcome to the show. Amanda's the Vice President of Research and Technology, and you're placing a lot of emphasis on sustainability.
Yeah, I think what we're seeing, and this isn't something, that it's just us, we're seeing this on a global scale, how important it is to really look at our impact on sustainability. What does the future mean? And we're seeing it across not only the entire transportation ecosystem, whether it's in the air or the ground, but also across all facets of society. And it's been amazing how it's really taken off in the last year or two.
Yep, and you see me moving around a little bit because I feel like I'm like right up on you. Anyhow, yeah, I imagine. The thing that our viewers like to hear about is a little bit about your background, and you have quite a background.
Yeah, 40 years.
40 years of a whole lot of things. So can you tell us how you got into the industry, how things got started for you, and all the way through to how you ended up at Airbus?
Well, I don't know how far back you want to go.
When you first realized aviation was a thing for you?
When I was, I went to a very small college, little place called Harvey Mudd, out in California. And
what part of California?
It's in Claremont, out the San Gabriel Valley.
Yeah.
One of the Claremont colleges. And back when I was there, it was really small. It was only 400 students, the entire school.
Yeah, the entire school.
The entire school, 400 students. And before we started my freshman year, they had a gathering of pre-frosh. And one of the things that they were telling us about was that one of the graduates of school had recently been accepted into the NASA astronaut program.
Oh.
And I thought to myself, wow, that has been a life, here I am all of 18 years old going, that's going to be my goal. I've always wanted to be an astronaut. I remember the Gemini program. I remember the Apollo program. And I'm like, this is what I can do. And here's a path. This guy got, what did George do for Pinky Nelson? And so I can follow his path. And the college offered a scholarship program where they would take 2 or 3 students a year and offer them the opportunity to learn how to fly as a practical application of the science and the technology we were learning in the classroom and in the laboratories. And I made that my goal to be in that program. And sure enough, the first year that I was eligible, I was one of the few accepted. And by the time I graduated, I was a flight instructor, commercial instrument. And
so you were getting closer to your dream.
And I saw that this was so exciting, and I just absolutely fell in love with aviation. And so I worked at Hughes Helicopter on the Apache program, and it was just in its prototype phase.
How, at that age, how did you get into that program?
Well, you have friends and you talk to people, and things hopefully work out that you can get an interview. And living in Southern California at the time, that's where aerospace was. I worked at Douglas Aircraft, working on DC-9s and DC-10s.
So you got quite a variety.
Yeah, and then I went to work for Hughes Aircraft Company on. And believe it or not, I worked on traveling wave tubes, vacuum tubes for the radars for fighters, the F-14, F-15, F-18, and did that for about 5 years. I ended up running those programs and got an opportunity to, there was an opening in the company. They were looking for a test pilot, someone who could fly the company aircraft and run tests from the cockpit. And I applied and got that job, and all of a sudden I was back in aviation.
So what kind of aircraft were you testing?
So we were, well, of course, Hughes Aircraft in its history only built 4 aircraft.
Okay.
Right, the Goose, the H-1 Racer, the XF-11, of course, which Howard crashed into Beverly Hills. So we didn't build airplanes. We were building systems that were going to be used by the military. So I was with Hughes. So I transferred from where I was to the Hughes missile systems. And my first assignment was right seat on a T-39. And we had things mounted on the belly, and we would go off and fly the aircraft as if we were a missile. And that way we could collect tremendous amounts of data in a quasi real world environment, get it out of the laboratory.
Were you always technically inclined?
Oh, absolutely. From a little kid.
Okay.
Yeah.
Were you the one that took stuff apart
And put it back together? Yes. Matter of fact, my mom tells stories of when I was in nursery school, I would build with the wooden blocks. I'd build things and I wouldn't let them tear it down at the end of the day.
Wow.
I would not let them clean up.
Really?
I was very upset. So they had to wait until I went home and then they would clean up.
Wow. So where was the astronaut dream while this was all,
Well,
while you
I saw
were
it
working in all these different areas?
Yeah, I saw it all as part of the path. And what I was doing with Hughes at the time, and later when we were acquired by Raytheon around 2000, I was developing tests, working with customers, then figuring out how to modify the appropriate aircraft to do that test and go out and execute that test, bring the data back, etc. And I'm like,
Right.
That's exactly what an astronaut does, except I was doing it in the atmosphere instead of exoatmosphere. And I knew a few astronauts at that time, and I finally applied around in the late 90s, and I think it was 2003 that I finally made it kind of into the process and got into the interview. I made it to the medical process and then was, I think, erroneously deselected. But,
Okay. So I'm gonna digress for just a minute. Wally Funk.
Yeah.
82 years old.
Yes. I had a webinar with her a couple of weeks ago.
Oh, wow. Really?
Yeah, long before she was selected to go up. With,
okay. So what do you think of all that? I mean, here's somebody that was fully qualified for the space program, along with other women, and was denied that opportunity. And here she is, 60 years later.
I think it was marvelous.
Yeah.
I think it was marvelous. I think it was a great thing that the Bezos and Blue Origin decided to have her on that first flight, a dream come true, and an opportunity for people to realize that dreams, that aspirations sometimes just take a long time to be achieved.
But they can still come to fruition.
Well, and I will tell you, but when I was at Harvey Mudd College in the flight program, my flight instructor was one of the WASPs. That's why I actually wear the FIFA knee now. And she just turned 100 years old, and she still flies.
Really?
Yeah.
Is she in Texas?
No, she's out in Southern California.
Oh, out in Southern Cal. Okay.
She doesn't fly solo anymore.
Right.
But she's amazing woman. Iris Critchell is her name. And actually, I could go on and on talking about Iris because she was actually an Olympian and represented the United States at the 1932 Olympics in Berlin.
Oh,
She's the oldest surviving Olympian from the 32 games.
I wonder if she knows Brigadier General McGee, the Tuskegee Airman, because he's the same age. He's 101.
I don't know that she does, but it's quite.
And he knows a few of the WASPs, so they're from that same era. Yeah, that's really pretty fascinating.
And I try to see her every year, and I'm hoping that. I haven't been out to California since the pandemic ended, but she's on my list.
Is she? Oh, that'd be wonderful for you guys to reunite. The other side of it with what Blue Origin, Jeff Bezos did was also bring up a 17-year-old.
Right, the youngest.
The youngest ever.
In space.
But I thought the dynamic was great because, that's will be part of our conversation about getting the next generation interested in aviation and aerospace and all the opportunities. And, I've been talking to people since I've been here about the fact that we want to see young people get into the industry and realize that there are opportunities outside of the norm. We're talking about the different areas outside of being a pilot, and you were mentioning your engineering and physics background.
I mean, that's how I started as an engineer, and then the opportunity to meld that with my flying, was marvelous, and I did that for 20 some odd years on and off, but always went back to, it's about the technology, it's about the mission, it's about what we can do to prepare the technology for the future.
Right.
So yeah,
I think all of the things.
I mean, I'm not flying for anybody anymore other than myself.
Sure. But I think all of the things that are going on in aviation and aerospace right now, the Blue Origins, the SpaceX, the Virgin Galactic, et cetera, and then all of the things going on with Airbus and all of the other manufacturers, it's moving in the direction of really being more environmentally conscious and paying attention to things like that. And that sustainable technology is something that is really going to affect the next generation coming up. You can tell me that they're going to be the brains for it.
Well, yeah, and I think it's important to them. I mean, that's what we're hearing from this upcoming generation, right? Us boomers we're fading out.
We got a little bit.
We got a little bit of heat left in us. But, I mean, the idea that we have to understand what the impact of what we're doing on everything around us is becoming more and more important. And and so now, in Airbus, we've been over the decades been improving the efficiency of aircraft to make sure that we're going to have less and less environmental impact. But there's only so far one can go in an evolutionary stage.
Okay.
And I think we're approaching that revolutionary step, right?
Yes.
So how do we break that bond that we have right now to the petroleum-based fuels? We're seeing it in automobiles, right? You're getting battery electric fuels, you're getting vehicles, you're getting fuel cell electric vehicles.
Well, and battery technology is improving every day.
Yes, and whether it's following Moore's law or something else, we don't know, but it is getting better. But there's some limits to how far that will go.
Right.
And batteries just do not have the energy density that is necessary for aviation.
Right.
I mean, you can do some little short range things,
right,
with very limited.
Which is why it works for urban mobility.
It works for urban air mobility. The downside being that after the aircraft lands, you either have to swap out batteries with something that's charged, plug it in for 6 hours.
Right.
And that doesn't work in today's aviation.
That's true. That's a great point.
Right. Yeah. So it's the weight, it's the volume, and it's the recharge time, the refueling time. And those are the things that we look at. So other options are replacing kerosene with alternative sustainable fuels, right? Whether they be bio-based from plant materials or solid municipal waste, or even completely synthetic, where it's created from what we call power to liquid. You just literally can use electricity or sunlight combined with carbon dioxide that has been sequestered from other sources and water, and you can actually create synthetic aviation fuel. Right now, it's very cost prohibitive, but the technology is there and it's improving.
Not to put you on the spot, but put you on the spot because you know a lot of things. Blue Origin's rocket is fueled by hydrogen and oxygen,
right,
which basically is
water,
H2O.
Right.
so very efficient to do that. Or
I mean, I don't know that one would say it's efficient. It's clean.
Yeah.
Right. There's a lot of
very clean. Yeah.
Yeah. There's energy that goes into
environmentally
creating,
friendly.
Yeah. There's energy that goes into creating the liquid oxygen and the liquid hydrogen that is then put on board the space vehicle.
Right.
But as it goes up, it's just pretty. A matter of fact, I mean, if you saw the flight the other last week, there was no exhaust, there's no plume.
Right.
It's very clean.
So
and
that's the first thing I noticed.
Right, and that's what we're looking at for moving beyond SAF, the sustainable aviation fuels. How do we break that bond to those carbon-based fuels, right? Because even with a sustainable aviation fuel, you still are creating carbon dioxide. You're still putting out nitrous oxide. You're still putting out different greenhouse gases at altitude.
Yeah.
We're just creating the fuel from a more sustainable source. So that's why we're looking at the next generation of fuel, which we see as being hydrogen.
Okay.
Similar to what, Blue Origin used in their ship, is that we would put a supply of liquid oxygen on board the aircraft, combine that with the oxygen, liquid hydrogen on the aircraft, oxygen in the air. You compress it using a pump so you have enough. You're not flying at the altitudes of space where
Right.
there's no oxygen. And you can burn that in a turbine just like you burn kerosene today. You can put it in a fuel cell to create electricity.
So you
to
guys are
drive
working
electric
on that?
motors. Absolutely
Okay.
working on that. And it is our goal. We're calling that project Zero E for zero emission, because the only thing that comes out of the tailpipe of the aircraft is water vapor. And our ambition is to have an airliner in service by 2035, which isn't all that many years away.
Right.
As
Not
really. Many of the people listening know, it takes a long time to design, develop, put together a production facility,
Right.
and get it certified for use.
Absolutely.
And so our timeline is at the mid-20s.
Okay.
Not too long from now.
Not far at all.
We have to have that technology ready to go. And so to make the decision, agreements with airlines, infrastructure beginning to be put in place to support these operations.
So can you tell our listeners and viewers a little bit more about what your responsibilities are? You've been in research and development a long time, but you're shifting, or you're placing emphasis on, from my understanding, on sustainability.
Right.
But what are your overall responsibilities, and what do you guys do? For their sake, to look at it from a career standpoint.
Sure. Well, I mean, so as people probably know, Airbus is primarily located in Europe, but it is a global organization. So we are always looking to find where are the technologies, where are the best of breed, so to speak, around the world. And I'm responsible for the Americas, the Western Hemisphere. And so we are working with colleges and universities, government research institutes, and even other vendors, our supply force and industry, or other industries, on what are the technologies that are being developed. And we partner with them, or we contract with them to help develop those new technologies that are going to be in the next generation of aircraft. And whether it's the cryogenic liquids that are necessary for hydrogen propulsion, or whether it's the aerodynamics for the new high aspect ratio wings that are much more efficient. We're working, those things are going on here in the US. I could go on to, robotics for in our manufacturing process.
All of those are part of your development.
New materials, composites and things for lighter aircraft. We're working on artificial intelligence that makes the plane smarter, and the air traffic control systems that configure it. That's all part of things that we're looking at here in the US.
So the kids coming up in school today, there are a variety of different areas they can specialize in that apply to all of these things that you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I think people realize, they think, oh, you build an airplane that's, bending metal and putting it all together,
Right.
and that's all that's in it. No, but it's a huge, huge industry that touches everything. I mean, we even are trying to figure out how to do our finance projects, and our process controls.
So you need people that have expertise in that.
And everything, yeah.
Yeah. So, well, that's a real plus in terms of opening the doors for opportunity. What are the things that Airbus is doing now to encourage and bring more, fill the pipeline, so to speak, for Airbus specifically?
Well, of course, we're here today.
Yeah, which with all you just said, as busy as you are, how did you have time to come in and be here for a week at EAA?
Well, next week's going to be pretty tough to catch up on all the email, and also next week starts the AIAA Aviation Conference, which is virtual this year, so I don't have to actually go somewhere.
Okay.
But,
and that stands for?
Oh, AIAA is the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics.
Exactly.
And we're very involved with them. And so it's aviation is a week-long conference, virtual this year. A clearinghouse, thousands of technical papers are being presented, discussions with industry leaders across aviation and space
Mhm.
on what are the technologies and what are the future look like.
Okay.
So there's all these things going on, and well, you know, I got a cell phone and I've got a laptop, and I
Right.
just try to keep up on all these. I was in Europe last week meeting with some of the folks I interface there to make sure that we're in sync and on track as we move forward.
So what's your proudest new project that you're working on as we speak?
Well, certainly the Zero E is the one that's getting a lot of attention.
Okay.
There are I think some very exciting projects that I can't
talk about
can't
yet?
really talk
Are you
about
just
yet.
take me out?
No, there may be people around here who may be a little bit too interested in those.
Right.
But we are really looking forward to making sure that when that next generation of airliner or aircraft, and I mean, they can see behind us, we make
Right.
spacecraft, we make military aircraft,
Yes.
we make helicopters.
Yeah. Which,
You know, the Zephyr, which is shown there in the bottom, which is currently flying somewhere over Arizona.
Okay.
The solar powered pseudo satellite. I mean, these are all exciting things, and what's going to be next? And you have to have that technology ready to go. So getting things for those who are familiar with the NASA designation of technology readiness levels, TRLs, right? We start with the basic research at TRL level 1. We want to get it up to that TRL level that's ready to go into production.
Yeah.
So,
What kind of questions are people asking you? You had a lot of people that have been coming through the Airbus Pavilion. What are they? Is it mostly just out of support because they either fly one or involved in some way, or are people asking questions that maybe our viewers would be interested in?
well, I mean, hey, it's all the above, because
Okay.
you know there's going to be more than 500,000 people here this week,
Right.
and
Exactly.
there's 500,000 different questions and opinions out there.
Yeah.
I think they want to know, you know, is it real? You know, this is what we're talking about is so revolutionary. Do we really think it's going to happen? Which we do. I mean, we are very, very committed to making this leap. Our you know, are we recovering from the pandemic, right? I did a session yesterday in concert with a vice president of Boeing. We talked about how the airline industry, as well as our customers, the airlines, are responding to the pandemic to make sure that it's safe to travel. I mean, there's all these things going on, and unfortunately, they all fall into my hat.
So were you busy last year in a different way during the pandemic?
Yeah, it was the focus was different. We were certainly had already started the Zero E program. The Zero E program started back in 2008, I believe.
Okay.
So it's actually been going on for quite some time, but now it's really gotten quite a bit of steam. But the focus on doing the research to make sure that the surfaces in the aircraft could be cleaned in a way that didn't damage the aircraft itself, right? You don't want to interfere with the electronics that are using the same air that it's going through, that it's going to be safe for people and passengers. So it was a lot of work going on to make sure that not only during the pandemic, but after the pandemic, that we're going to be safe. Because there's going to be another epidemic someday, right? Before this one, there was SARS, there was MERS, I mean, this isn't our first epidemic. It just happens to be the biggest one we've dealt with in our lifetime.
And threw everybody for a loop. Earlier, you were talking about your background coming up into the industry. Specifically as a woman coming up, and with all that you've learned and dealt with, what's your advice to the young women out there that are aspiring maybe to be an astronaut? It's a different level now, but you know, or a different aspect of things. But what's your advice to them?
I always try to find mentors. Find someone that you admire what they do, and talk to them and get them to talk back to you, right? It could be someone who you think is completely unapproachable, but until you go up and talk to them,
thank you for saying
you don't know. And I had some wonderful mentors as I was growing up. So that is very important. And it doesn't have to be another woman. There are some good men out there who are.
I'd like to think so.
Who are willing to support it, that it is necessary. I mean, when we look at aerospace, it is so very, very important that we open all of the opportunities
Right.
for everyone who can do the job.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's an exciting, it's a wonderful industry, and to be involved in it is pure fun.
Yeah.
So find the people, keep an idea on where you'd like to go, but be willing to take those excursions. Right? Sometimes your path isn't straight.
Right. Most of the time.
Right. And be open to opportunities. Say yes.
Yes.
Many
Make yourself
times,
available.
right. Many times in my life, one thing we didn't talk about that was prior to joining Airbus and after I was with Raytheon doing all the things that we talked about earlier,
Yes.
I spent 8 years working for the government in a previous presidential administration because someone called me from the White House and said, we would like for you to serve the president. And so I spent almost 8 years in the Pentagon. I was the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense and got to see aerospace from an entirely different aspect. And not only learned a lot, but also brought what I had to them. And
you never saw that coming.
Never saw that coming. So
be prepared for that.
Yeah, and yes, it was not only a huge deviation in my career. I took a hit financially. Government does not pay as well as industry, but sometimes you just have to say yes.
Right. Well, and it's serving in a whole different way.
In a very different way, and it's very, very gratifying.
Yeah.
You know, and I actually, as I'm sitting here, I see some folks walking by in uniform.
Mm-hmm.
I really, really admire their service and what they provide, the opportunities that they provide to us. Certainly a level of respect that I truly gained during that time.
As we wind down here, you had mentioned your parents when you were growing up in terms of what kind of influence did they have about this career path you were wanting to take that's, especially back in the day was not considered a norm?
Well, yeah, and my father's an attorney, and I mean, I'll admit I lived a reasonably privileged life, and that I was interested in science and math and engineering and things. It was a complete disappointment to him.
He wanted another attorney, at least. Yeah. But I think you did okay.
Yeah, I think I did okay. He's still like,
Still questioning. You're like 40 years later, Dad, really?
And my mom was always a very encouraging person. That it was, try things and sometimes you aren't successful, but you learn from your setbacks, and from your failure.
Yeah.
And that if you learn from that, you can try something different, or try the same thing in a different way. There are ways to
I can bring that all the way forward. And again, speaking to the aspiring young aviators that are people aspiring to be an aviation or aerospace professional, the same thing applies when you're trying to network. You may walk up to somebody and try to start a conversation, and they may have something else on their mind and be busy, and you say, "Oh, well, never mind," and fine, you try again with them, or you go up to somebody else.
I mean, I'm going to do some name dropping here, and I don't do this to highlight who I am or who I know, but more to give people the opportunity to remember you do these things. If you go somewhere and you know that there's going to be a keynote speaker or a figure that you admire. I met Sally Ride because she was keynoting a conference, and I was the only one who seemed to be brave enough to go up and talk to her
and say hello.
And we corresponded for years. I've met Bert Rutan. I've been on conferences now with his brother Dick. Jeff Bezos, I was at a dinner and he was receiving an award, and during dinner I went up to him and
was it the same dinner?
And this was in Washington.
Yes, I was at the same dinner.
Okay.
The reason I bring that up is because we saw a payphone on the wall going into the men's room, and we both made a comment about it. And when I made the comment to him, I didn't recognize him right away. And then as I was talking to him, I finally recognized him. But we were talking about a payphone, and why was there a payphone? And then, you know, for a high tech guy like him, he's like, "So, do you think it works? Should we drop a quarter in it?" You know? But
he's very approachable, and
exactly.
we talked for like 15, 20 minutes.
Yep, he's very much so.
You know, I know probably a dozen people who've gone into space, and through NASA, because I talked with them.
Right.
And it's those type of connections that someday later you don't know where
you
it's
don't
going
know when or how.
or how it's going to circle back.
Right.
And it could be an advantage to you, it could be an advantage to them.
Yeah.
I mean, I was in the mall on Saturday and I ran into a congressman I knew. And we had a conversation outside a department store.
Yeah.
It's how you build a network. You just say hi.
Yeah. Yesterday, and I think the kid talked to you. Yesterday, a dad came in with his kid, and he was trying to, his kid's getting ready to graduate from college or whatever, and he was trying to get him to network. And he sent him over here, but he had to send him. He's like,
right.
Go,
that's right.
Introduce yourself. Go talk to him. And he finally did. I don't even remember the kid's name, but that happens
Cody.
a lot.
What's his name?
It was Cody. That's him. Yeah. Yeah, that was just yesterday that he did that. So, well, his dad kind of had to urge him to make that first step. So it's very important. Well, this is great to have a chance to talk with somebody of your background and experience and everything, and share that with the viewing audience. Is there any closing thoughts you would like to share, just in general, about Airbus and about the industry?
Well, to everyone out there listening or watching, dream big, and those, if you take action on your dreams, they may actually become reality. And that's what we've been doing here at Airbus, is thinking about what could be and then making it happen. And that's the exciting part of this.
Absolutely. Well,
and the exciting part, by the way, of the EAA.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been an EAA member since the 80s, and when you come here to Oshkosh, you see people say, "Well, what if we did this?" And they try it. And there's some wild things here, but there's some wonderful things here. It's so exciting to be here.
And there's so many things here.
Yes.
So you can't even in a week, you can't see it all. So
it's not back year after year.
Not possible. Well, this has been a great. Amanda Simpson, Vice President of Research and Development for Airbus Americas. Really great to have you here. I'm going to be talking to John Leary in about 5 minutes, and we'll talk about the new partnership that you guys have with EAA for AeroEducate.
Right. And I'm off to do a forum in a little bit. So
what's your forum going to be on?
So this is a forum on sustainability, and I'm with the CEO of the Gamma, the General Aviation Manufacturer. We're going to be talking about so what's going on, right? Yeah. What can the future be? The commercial side, general aviation side.
Yeah, very good. Yeah. What time is that? At 11:30.
11:30. So.
She's like, so guess what? I gotta go. Well, great. Well, I look forward to. I'll try to get over there after I finish the show with John. To at least see the last half of it. So, but thank you very much for being on the program.
All right.
Great. This is All Things Aviation and Aerospace, speaking too fast, at Airbus's Pavilion. We're talking here with Amanda Simpson, the Vice President of Research and Development, and talking about sustainability and also just the opportunities beyond being a pilot or mechanic. There's a whole bunch of other things that you can do in this industry. So I hope everybody enjoyed watching and listening. I'm going to put us on pause for about 5 minutes, and then I'll bring John O'Leary. He's the Vice President of Engineering, and he's also heavily involved with things like AeroEducate and other programs, initiatives in reference to bringing the next generation, you guys, into this industry. So we'll be with you in a little bit. Thank you. Hi, everybody. Vince Mickens here, All Things Aviation Aerospace at the Airbus Pavilion at EAA Airventure 2021 here in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. Was just talking with Amanda Simpson, the head of the Vice President of Research and Development, and now I'm with the Vice President of Engineering, John O'Leary. Like Amanda, John's been doing this stuff for a long time, has quite a bit of experience, and John, welcome to the show.
Vince, good to see you again. Thank you very much for having me.
Good and great to have you. I appreciate it. You know, there's a lot for us to talk about. We touched on some things Amanda and I did in terms of sustainability and then about the next generation. I know that that's an area of emphasis for you, is
Sure.
how we bring folks into the pipeline.
Yep.
Before we get started with that, though, speaking of pipelines, tell us a little bit about your background. You know, how did you get
Yeah.
into aviation and all of that?
Well, like a lot of folks around here at EAA, I grew up just wanting to be a pilot, just liked airplanes, liked everything about airplanes. Where I grew up, though, there weren't a lot of airports nearby. So eventually, I just continued to learn what I could, went to school, did as best I could, and then got an engineering degree. And along the way, got back into the military, and through the Marine Corps, was able to get into aviation and then do that. Eventually joined Beechcraft in Wichita, Kansas, and now with Airbus.
When did you know aviation was going to be the career?
You know, when Neil Armstrong stepped on the moon.
That was it, huh?
Yeah,
That was a turning point?
But that was the thing that, at least in my generation, that
Right.
was all of the emphasis on the Apollo missions, and it really captured your imagination.
And it was high tech for us back then.
It was, yes, very high tech. Even though it was all slide rules, it was very high tech.
Because you and I were talking about, with technology what it is today, a lot of technology is taken for granted by today's generation because they grew up with it
Right.
from when they were infants, you know.
Right.
So they recognize certain technology as almost like we did the payphone or something, you know,
Yep.
or rabbit ears on top of a TV set.
Aluminum foil.
Yeah, exactly. So that inspired you, and it kind of sent you in the direction of saying, hey, I want to do something like that.
It sure did.
Yeah.
And I think to Amanda's point, I'm sure she talked a lot about what Airbus is doing with sustainability, and I think we're almost at the cusp of a next kind of aviation revolution.
Right. Yeah. We were talking about that because, and she and I talked about it too. The next generation is going to be key to that,
Right.
because of their technology, their understanding of technology, and these are some smart kids.
And
you know?
exactly right. And they're well positioned to support the industry going forward, because as the airplanes continue to develop and the services continue to develop, it's more and more dependent on software.
Right.
It's not always the hardware that's as important anymore. It's more and more following, again, the automobile model, where software is a bigger and bigger component and a bigger driver in the product.
Yeah. Now you can go buy a car and they have a person that specializes in telling you how to use all of the gadgets
Exactly right.
in the car.
Exactly right.
And that's pretty impressive. So tell us a little bit about your biggest initiative now that you're partnering with EAA on,
Right.
Aero Educate. How did that come about? Yeah, tell us your involvement and about the program.
You know, there's all of us in the industry are trying to solve this problem that says, look, we're really in the business of generating intellectual property, whether that's engineering or it's business models to be able to sell services, sell the product. We're all in the business of producing that intellectual property. And in order to keep driving forward, in order to keep developing new solutions, you've got to bring in the next generation of folks. So it doesn't matter who you are, everybody in the industry is trying to do that. And it becomes a bit of a competition for talent. We had talked to EAA about things that we're doing with building RV-12s and things like that in high school. And so they asked, well, what's your interest? And I said, it's education, and using education to expose the next generation of folks to aviation in general.
And as it applies to the things that we know Airbus is going to need, like a lot of aviation companies, in terms of advanced technology development, et cetera.
So EAA said, well, here's what we're trying to do with a program we call Aero Educate. And it really is about making connections throughout the industry, building off of what they've done with their Young Eagles program,
Right.
but filling that gap
Filling the
after,
gap.
right, that the young person goes flying and thinks, well, this is pretty interesting.
Right.
Then there's nothing to keep them on a path.
Yeah.
And that's what we're trying to fill that gap.
And engage and keep
Yep.
them engaged.
Yep.
Yeah.
So many times around here, you'll talk to somebody and I'll ask younger folks, you know, how did you get started? And inevitably they'll say, well, my aunt, my uncle was a pilot, airline pilot, worked at an FBO, something like that.
Right.
There was always somebody there to guide them.
Yes.
So what this Aero Educate program is trying to be is that idea that says, well, now you know somebody in the industry that can help you keep moving along that path.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's back up a little bit and talk about the building of the RV-12, which was, I think, what, 3 years ago or so? Yeah. Yeah. So tell us how that came about and what that was like. I mean, the thought of some high school kids getting together and building a plane that you've actually flown.
Yeah, that's a great airplane.
As a matter of fact, were you the first to fly it after it
I
was completed?
Yep,
Okay.
that was my job.
Great guy.
Well done program, well done airplane.
How does that work?
7 or 8 years ago, the Airbus Foundation in Toulouse started a thing called the Flying Challenge. And it's really, at its core, it's aimed at working with schools, especially in disadvantaged areas, to encourage kids to stay and get through education.
Right.
Get an education. Whether it's a 4-year degree, a
Motivated.
2-year degree, yeah, just get them engaged. And my organization's a bunch of engineers. So we went for 2 or 3 years mentoring young children. But then here at EAA, we ran into an organization called Tango Flight that does the same thing, but was doing it with building an airplane.
Okay.
And that was a square peg in a square hole for us in
Okay.
engineering.
Made
'Cause
perfect sense.
Yeah, now it makes sense. Now we got something we can talk to and we can relate with the kids. And
Yeah.
we can say, no, here's how you do this.
Mm-hmm.
And so the foundation said, okay, we'll sponsor the first couple of airplanes. Tango Flight as an organization does a great job of integrating into the schools, the academic side of it. They own and administer the airplane, so that keeps the school district out of that whole mess.
Liability factor.
Yeah,
Okay.
out of that whole mess. So they handle that very well. And we provide mentors just to have conversations with the kids.
How long did it take to build that aircraft?
It was one academic year.
Okay.
So they do it in a year.
And the curriculum, if for lack of a better term, the process for building it in that academic year, is that something that you oversaw, or how did that work?
That's what Tango Flight brings to the table.
Okay.
They integrated it initially into a program called Project Lead the Way, which is a nationwide program around STEM education. But they've since gone a little bit beyond that to where now they've tailored their curriculum specific to this build, along with some of the science and technology and really teamwork aspects that go
Right.
into building an airplane.
With your background in engineering and everything, what was it like for you to see these kids, working on something this significant? Because I mean, it's no easy undertaking to build an airplane.
Now, and what's engineering aside, what was really great was the look on their face when you said to them, "Hey, we're going to build an airplane," and they thought,
Before
"Okay."
you even started.
Yeah, and they think, "Okay, we're going to build an airplane." Yeah, we built model airplanes before.
Right.
And then they walk into the room, and you see a wing skin and a wing panel, and they go, "No, this is an airplane." And the challenge is, you build it, you fly it if you want to. We don't make them fly it,
Right.
but they all say yes,
Of course.
and they all go flying.
So you've taken them up. That's many of them their first flight.
Quite a few. It's their first time
First
in an
flight
airplane.
in an airplane.
Yeah.
And it's in a plane that they participated in building.
And the fun part
How cool is that?
the fun part from an engineering standpoint is inevitably you get them in the airplane and you say, because there is an academic side to this, the school's teaching them. There's a teacher teaching them about aerodynamic stall and all that. So you'd say to them, "Hey, you remember that part on aerodynamic stall?" And they go, "Well, yeah, kind of." I said, "Okay, well, we're going to do one." And you start bringing the nose up and the power. Okay.
They're like,
Now
okay,
you're
now
not
you know what it
you're
is.
not going to forget what airflow separation is.
Absolutely. That's really good. When we were kids, because we're about the same age, and I would have given anything to be a part of a program like that automatically. And I bring that up from another perspective. A lot of kids that were involved with this program didn't know anything about aviation, right? So this was their first introduction to it.
Right.
Give us a little bit of perspective on that, of bringing kids in that don't know anything about aviation, but are, we have a lot of kids here coming to this event for this week that this is their first time experiencing anything related to the industry.
That's exactly right. And a lot of kids, we talk to them after they get done at the end of the year and they say, I never even thought about aviation. They may have been on a track that took them sort of in a mechanical direction. Some of them were completely not related to engineering or the technology side, but they never thought about aviation.
Right.
Until they got in the airplane. Now they find themselves working at an FBO, making money to go to school or work on an A&P license.
Right.
And they're off in the path inside aviation. In fact, I was just talking the other day to some parents that stopped by. Their daughter's in her second or third year at Texas A&M. And they recognize the name on the airplane. They recognize the paint scheme, and they came over and started talking to them. And they were just proud parents because their daughter, I said, we didn't know what she was going to do. And all of a sudden she got involved with this build, and it was just the light clicked. And there she went.
So I have a bunch of things on it, but the first thing I'm thinking about, you brought up parents. That plays a big role.
Yeah.
how do you guys, and what's your thoughts about engaging? You and I were chatting about that the other day, about engaging parents more and for them to get a better understanding of the opportunities in aviation and what aviation could mean for their kid.
Yeah, I think the first thing is allowing parents to see that even in a factory environment or in a services environment, it's not at all like it was 50 years ago, right? Where it's a dark, dingy environment. It's very much technology based, very advanced, a lot of robotics involved that parents don't really understand just yet how all that's going to play in. And also, it's a career path and it's a lucrative career path.
Right. Yeah.
These are scarce resources, and when you gain that technology, you gain that capability. We're going to keep you in the industry.
So one of the things you were talking about. So if parents live within the vicinity of a Wichita or other areas that have aviation or aerospace companies, they should call up and see if they can get a tour for their kids.
Really difficult to do
For both of them.
Yeah, but really difficult to do.
Right.
Because the
That's
aviation
true.
companies say we're building airplanes, we're not a tour.
Yeah.
What they can do though is they can go to AeroEducate. They go to the AeroEducate website here at EAA, and that'll help show and expand as more content gets built. See online what that environment looks like.
Okay, so that is part of the AeroEducate.
Yeah.
Yep.
Is in order to, I know what EAA is trying to set up where it's kind of a badging system.
Mhm.
It says here's the things you got to do in order to get not only the kids but the teachers and the parents exposed to what the aviation industry looks like.
Yeah. So that's a great way to do that then. Yeah.
And that is that's the key. I think that's a new element in this idea of how we're going to bring on the next generation.
So going forward with this program, are there other programs or other initiatives that you're involved in or looking at to continue to expand this opportunity for the young?
Yeah, some of what the Airbus Foundation does, it has a program called Airbus Goes to School.
Mm-hmm.
So we kind of aim that at the elementary school and the middle school level. But I think there's also new models that need to be developed in order to go do this. And part of what I'm interested in EAA and AeroEducate is to be able to share that idea with the likes of United Airlines, Delta, Siemens, others. To be able to say, what do you guys do? How are you
Right,
doing it?
and everybody kind of collaborate on it.
Yep.
To make it move forward. Go ahead. You were going to say.
Well, there was an interesting example that I stole from a whole different industry, but it was around robotics, and it was in Pittsburgh.
Okay.
They have an organization called basically it's an advanced robotics, but they patterned it after Rosie the Riveter, with the arm, but the arm is robotic.
Oh wow.
But what they figured out they do is they've got high school girls interested in it.
Okay.
Those high school girls then go and mentor the middle school girls, and they dress up with the Rosie the Riveter garb and all that.
Really?
Now that's a powerful. If you're a middle school girl, a high school girl is
right.
That's a top.
That's a big deal.
It doesn't get any better than that, right?
That's true.
Some guy like
and
me
it's
shows
relatable.
Absolutely
Yeah.
relatable. Some guy like me shows up
Versus us old guys.
Yeah. Go away.
With the gray hair.
Yeah, exactly right. But if you get some high school girl talking about robotics to a middle school girl, she's like, well, this is cool.
And it's the same thing, college to high school.
Yep.
It's the same process. But no, that's kind of a neat concept.
That's one of those kind of models we got to find.
Yeah. I was going to ask you a little bit more about, first of all, your engineering responsibilities, overseeing engineering for a company as big as Airbus. Airbus America specific for you, right? So what else does that entail? I want our viewers to have a better understanding of the broad scope that you kind of touched on in terms of technology about engineering, that it's not some of the things people may envision, or not just.
Here for Airbus commercial aircraft here in the Americas, we work mostly on airframe and cabin and cargo systems, interior components, and airframe. Specifically wings, mostly wing design and analysis on all the Airbus products.
Where are your wings built?
In Broughton, in England.
Okay.
That's the main manufacturing and assembly site. And then the wings go to the final assembly points in Hamburg, Germany, Toulouse, Tianjin, China, and Mobile, Alabama.
Okay. So is it almost done when it gets here to the States?
Pretty well. It's got to be integrated in the fuselage, which is not a trivial task. But it's
what about avionics, engines, all of that?
A lot of the engines all come as components from the engine manufacturers. Much of the avionics Airbus does itself. A lot of software development around flight control systems in particular, and then the integration of that into the avionics. Really one of our core capabilities and our crown jewels,
Okay.
and all the way through the whole family of Airbus product.
And cabin, interior, connectivity, all those things, where is that done?
Based in Hamburg, Germany. That's the center of
Okay,
excellence.
that's, okay,
The engineering center in Mobile is an extension of that. And it's really a fascinating area because it, unlike the airframe, it's got about a 5-year life cycle. It's continually changing and developing,
right,
especially in-flight entertainment equipment.
yes.
And it's a
Yeah.
competitive advantage for our customers. So they're
Right.
competing in the cabin.
Well, like I always like to say, the passenger in the cabin, they want seamless technology. So they want to be able to, from their office to their car to the plane, be constantly connected.
Yep. If you're a passenger, you and I both are. Just getting from A to B that's what we expect.
Right.
But getting me
Exactly.
from A to B while I'm entertained or I'm comfortable or I'm busy, I'm working.
Yeah.
That's important.
And that's another aspect for people in terms of a career.
Yep.
Because somebody has to design that, make it user friendly, et cetera, and so forth. And then the design, and lately it's come out, the design of seats, the ergonomics and all of that, and the material, and that's a specialized area.
It is.
Yeah.
The overhead panel,
Right.
what we call the passenger service unit, all of that, integrating power systems into the seats.
And now because of the pandemic, the it's not to say the air conditioning system, but the
HVAC system.
for the aircraft.
Yep.
Which is now the filtering and all of that has become, and how frequently it's circulated. You guys all deal with that
We
too?
do. Mostly in Hamburg, but a lot of CFD analysis, computational fluid dynamics analysis, has now gone into modeling how air flows through the cabin, how often it changes out.
Yeah.
That turns out it's all very positive.
Yeah.
We knew we had high flow rates before just because of the nature of keeping the cabin pressurized, keeping people comfortable. But
Yeah.
now we've analyzed it much more fully than we would have before, and very, very confident in the results.
What is your day-to-day responsibility and what do you do?
Here in the Americas, oversee both the airframe side and the cabin side in Mobile, Alabama, and it's really just dealing with people.
Okay.
In particular, thinking about what does the next generation have to look like? Because the engineer of the next 20 years, it's not like the engineer of the last 20 years.
And you're transitioning slowly but surely, right?
We are. We're right on the cusp of doing it. A lot more data analysis, a lot more simulation, a lot more modeling, and it's a lot of those skill sets that this generation coming up already knows, and it's already intuitive to them. So our real transition is taking that capability along with some engineering capability, a degree, if you will, and then getting them experienced in what an airplane is,
Right.
and being able to recognize what good design looks like, what a good solution looks like.
And that's what I was going to ask you about. So I'm in college and I just graduated with a degree, maybe an engineering degree, maybe in design, maybe whatever, but it's applicable to what you guys do. And I want to come work for Airbus, and I get a job with Airbus. How do you bring entry-level people in terms of bringing them up to speed with what they need to learn?
First thing we do is we embed them in a team with a strong mentor
Okay.
that can start to teach them about airplanes, in particular the processes and methods that we use at Airbus,
Mhm.
and how that applies to the way we produce our airplanes, whether it's a cabin or an airframe, and start bringing them along that way. What we find is that they're looking at it from the side of saying, okay, I see all that. I can automate certain elements of this. And I like to say that, and I like to say engineers are fundamentally lazy. So if you tell me I can automate something and not have to grind through it time and time again,
You're
then,
like,
all of a sudden,
how quickly can we do that?
yeah, that's good, kid. How
Yeah.
can you do that?
Yeah. So that's kind of neat though, because the young eye, the young brain, quicker, sharper, they bring,
They're bringing stuff to the table that we just don't see yet.
right, but they lack experience still.
That's right.
So the veteran can also save them some steps
They-
of the challenges that they may face and that type
We
of
like to say, yeah, you got a really pretty picture there. It looks great, but it's wrong. I can tell you by the architecture, the stress distribution doesn't look like that.
Yeah.
Not me, guys that work for me.
No,
I go, yeah.
I got you.
Talk to
Right
them.
here. You've been an engineer for a long time. What type of things have you learned throughout your years in terms of the path that you've taken as an engineer that you would pass along to others to say, hey, as you go through, which you don't really, you know, Amanda made that point, and everybody actually on the show always makes a point. We don't know what our path's going to be.
Right.
We start out what we think we want to do, and then things happen, things change, or something comes up and we go, oh, you know what? I really like that.
Yep.
You know, and then you start going that direction. So with the things that you've experienced over the years, and you've been both on the military and civil side, et cetera, what are your thoughts about that?
I like to say never say never. So, especially in those early career years, whether you move inside the engineering organization in your company or you actually even shift companies,
Right.
look for new opportunities, get exposed to different products, different techniques, different methodologies.
Okay.
And that's how you really quickly gain the experience of how things are done in the industry. At some point, you begin to move into more leadership positions, and companies will help you make that transition to not just purely technical, but technical and leadership. So it's really, you can't be afraid to move. You
Okay.
can't be afraid to take on a new challenge, especially even if you feel like, you know, I'm not 100% sure I can do that.
Right.
Right?
But give it a shot.
Give it a shot. You're never alone in this industry.
And when you're young, you're flexible. You should be flexible enough
You
to
should be.
move around
You should be.
and take the opportunities when you can.
And we never leave anybody in a boat by themselves. So even if you're not 100% sure that you're going to do this, there's going to be somebody there with you that says, yeah, okay, I can help you along the way there.
Yeah.
Because that's the nature of the industry, right?
Yeah.
We're focused heavily on safety, so we're never going to allow a single point failure, whether it's a person or a system.
So you and I have been painting a rosy picture with this conversation, but we know that there are kids that, as you mentioned earlier, kids that may come from troubled backgrounds or whatever, but they're smart, they're talented. How do you address kids, or how does your program or programs address kids that you know have the potential, but are just kind of almost like what teachers have to deal with? They're just being defiant, lazy, or a combination.
Yeah.
Or they don't. Well, there you go. Or they don't think that they have the smarts to do something of this nature, of this like this industry.
Well, I think there's two aspects to it. First of all, it's a combination of having conversations and showing them that, look, you can do it, and this industry is interesting, and you can make it work. Interestingly, the other half of that, the other part of that I have found as I've started working with universities, is that if you can identify that young person, especially if they're in a socioeconomic challenged environment, that university is going to go after them. They want them in their school. They're doing the same thing.
Okay.
They're looking for that next talent pool. College is a business. So they're looking for that talent pool that they can bring in. And there are programs to help them financially.
So if you see the potential and you refer them,
Yeah.
recommend them,
Yeah.
then there's a good chance that they'll get picked up
And
and move forward.
I was talking to a college president at Wichita State, and he made a point to me. He said, you know, college environment for a young person whose family hasn't been in a 4-year school, it's an environment they just don't understand. Not unlike aviation, it's an environment they just don't understand.
That's good.
You make that connection, and they come onto the campus and they begin to realize, no, this is actually a friendly environment. There's actually things here I can do. And if you can get them associated with mentors that look and feel just like them, kind of back to that, I can see it, I can be it kind of idea that sometimes folks talk about, then they can make that connection and bring them on. So oddly enough, we're all trying to do the same thing.
Right.
Maybe for slightly different reasons.
Right.
But we're all trying to do the same thing.
Gotcha. Yeah. When with regard to opportunities in the industry specific to Airbus, looking at the future, what are some of the things that you see coming forward? We've talked about urban air mobility before. We had a short conversation about that. Things like that. What are some of the things that are coming about? I talked a lot about some sustainability things with Amanda.
Yeah, I think in terms of the amount of complexity inside large urban areas, and the flip side of that, the amount of distance in the rural areas, trying to bridge those gaps in places like Kansas, Nebraska, this part of the country that are typically flyover states. How do you move people around? I think there are business elements and models that can build to fill those voids. And probably, as I talk to different people around folks around the show. I think it actually starts in the rural areas. So
Okay.
you're trying to move cargo, you're trying to move patients,
Mhm.
you're trying to move vaccines,
Yeah.
right, into areas that are not easily served.
Important utility value.
Yeah. And if you can do that with a small vehicle that is single pilot or no pilot, then that's where the model starts. The business model.
Talking about autonomous flight, huh?
There you go.
Yeah.
And then once you cut your teeth on that and you figure out how to do it, then you can move into a more complex environment like San Francisco and New York City,
Yeah.
where you've got high-rise buildings and strange weather patterns. Even if it's a nice, beautiful day like today, if you've stood in a big city, you can feel that wind tunnel going down between those buildings.
Yeah.
So that's a complex environment for an aircraft.
How much of what you guys do, what Airbus does, is R&D, is research and development in terms of these new future technologies?
I can't speak with great insight into
Right.
all the things that Airbus is doing, but
Right.
I can tell you that we do a lot.
Okay.
And our R&D budgets have stayed healthy. It is very much a focus for Guillaume Fouret, our CEO,
Mhm.
and he's very much looking forward to saying, just as we were the first airplane manufacturer of large Part 25 airplanes to incorporate fly-by-wire, we're going to be the first ones to introduce the next set of sustainable fuel systems. I also believe, though he doesn't say that, there's also the element of, and we're going to figure out how to do this door-to-door transportation.
Right.
But I can't speak in any kind of great insight.
I understand.
But Guillaume is very forward-thinking.
Yeah.
So I think he's going to have the company positioned for success.
Let's talk about EAA for a bit. I'm impressed about you and Amanda at your levels. You guys have a lot of responsibility, but here you are at the Airbus Pavilion, hanging out at EAA and talking to customers and talking to people that are interested in things that Airbus is doing. And tell us about that. Tell us your perspective about, and how long have you been coming to EAA?
This is only my 4th year here at the show.
Okay.
I came here the first time because we had the EFAN here, and there was a ceremony around that. And I just walked in and I said, oh my God, I had no idea what was going on.
Did you ever want to come when you were younger and just never got around to it, or you
Just never
you didn't really?
It's just one of those things you never, it's a bucket list thing. Oh, I'll do
Right.
it sometime. I watched
Right.
it and I was just mesmerized.
Yeah.
I'm a lifetime member of EAA. And,
Okay.
and I joined EAA as I started building. I was building an airplane at my house. I was a home builder, all right, RV8 guy.
Okay.
And EAA was part of that. Came to Sport Air workshops. They got me started. And it's that kind of an organization that brings together people.
Yes.
I mean, that's all. That's
Bring together people under one roof. So as a home builder, and even as an engineer, you found the workshops here helpful for certain aspects.
Oh, I love doing it.
Yeah.
You know, I like to joke that as a VP of engineering, they don't let you do anything. And the only time I really get to do something is in my, my own garage there working on it.
Oh, okay. How long did it take you to build that RVA?
I got to the point of firewall 4. It took me about 4 years. And then I actually kind of said, you know what? I'm going to buy a Stearman and do formation flying here at the field and a Stearman. So I took the RV8, which was basically, I say, up to firewall 4, and I donated it to the EAA. The EAA's got a program where you can donate it to a chapter, and then they sell it and use the proceeds or they complete it and use it to do a Young Eagles program.
Okay. Wow.
So I never did finish it. Yeah. And
why the RVA? There's a lot of different kinds of kit planes and home builds that you can do. Why did you pick that one?
Tail wheel and
Okay.
single. You're sitting on the center line of the airplane. Classic stick and rudder, high maneuverable airplane.
Okay. So that was the attraction.
And the RV series are a lot of fun. I'm not trying to be a spokesman for Vans, but it's a good program, a lot of fun.
Sure. So that being said, you talked about the program with Tango Flight and building that aircraft with the high school kids. But if there's an aviation enthusiast and he's taking flight lessons and he's thinking, yeah, I'm going to get my private pilot's license, but I'd love to build a plane. Maybe he comes to a show like this and gets inspired. What's the first thing you're going to recommend to that person?
Go on.
To a kid.
Yeah. First of all, kid airplanes are very doable. The instructions that come with them now, the technology that the kit builders have been able to put into the production of the detailed parts,
Okay.
make it very easy to fit together.
Yeah.
You don't need a whole lot of tooling. You don't need a whole lot of complexity. So the building of the airplane is very doable. The instructions are straightforward. You don't need a whole bunch of technology, so don't be afraid of that. However, go onto the websites and then go online and talk to, pick on vans.
Experiment,
Yeah, vans.
people that are experienced with it.
There's a huge network out there that if
Mhm.
you've got a question, you ask, and you'll probably get too much opinion.
Right.
There's a lot of information.
Because somebody's probably gone through what you're going
Certainly
through.
have.
Yeah.
Certainly have. And that's
Yeah.
a good place to start, to say, hey, go to Vans Air Force or RANS or any of the build websites. Say, I'm thinking about building an airplane. And you'll get a lot of advice on different types of models and how to make a selection, how to think through the process. So it's really quite easy to do.
Okay.
A lot easier to do than you think. Just like the kids that walk in the classroom and say, we're going to build an airplane.
Right.
It's that same thing, only at an adult level.
Okay.
It's not that difficult.
Yeah. As we kind of wrap up, what are some of your closing thoughts about, again, recommendations to the next generation of getting into this industry and based on your experiences?
You know, I think what we've got to do as an industry is really make it obvious to that next generation that there are things you can do in the business of aviation, that this is a very close-knit, very welcoming industry.
Community. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it is really just you bump into people you know.
All
and,
the time.
And everybody's happy to talk.
Yes.
It's an interesting.
The pilots and aviation people happy to talk. Yeah.
Yeah. They just
all
keep
the
talking
time.
about it.
Yeah.
And there's
That's
a tremendous number of opportunities, even if you don't say, well, I don't think I want to be a pilot or a mechanic. There's a lot inside the business of aviation. Almost more importantly, as we begin to think about these new models like urban mobility, rural mobility, that engineers aren't going to solve the business problems.
Right.
And their engineers aren't going to communicate what that solution looks like. And they're not going to be able to communicate to the public what that's going to look like.
Good point.
And that's going to take a lot of folks with strong critical thinking.
Yeah. A good point. Well, John, I think we've covered everything.
It's great talk.
It's great to have you on the show and talk about all things Airbus, if you will. Wish you luck with the partnership with the AeroEducate. This sounds like a really neat initiative, and I hope it continues to grow and do well. And I know that you're on top of things that have to do with filling that pipeline with some new talent.
Yeah,
So
looking forward to it.
yeah, very good. Well, thank you again for being on the show.
Thanks a lot.
So, well, that wraps it up for us today here at Airbus Pavilion at EAA's Airventure. I'm thinking about other things at the same time, like what planes I want to go look at. But I want to thank you guys for watching and listening, and we will be doing another show tomorrow here from the Pavilion. My name is Vince Mickens. This is All Things Aviation and Aerospace. Take care and have a good one. And come out if you're in the area. Take care.